Now the valley of Sodom was full of bitumen pits, and as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some fell into them, and the rest fled to the hill country. I've often wondered, is there any evidence for tar pits? Because it's kind of a strange thing. It's not something you come across every day. What is tar, first of all? Well, if you heat crude oil in a column, it separates out into these different components, and at the bottom you get bitumen tar because it's denser. It also happens to be a lot more viscous, and that's what makes it dangerous. If you fall into a tar pit, you're going to get stuck. So where would you find tar pits? As you can see on this map, it's not too common. There are only a few locations around the world where you're going to find tar pits, including the location of Sodom and Gomorrah in the southeast of the Dead Sea in Jordan. In terms of modern evidence, you can see tar to this day is being extracted and used. It's in fact a major export for Jordan because they don't have local oil resources to export. And he has another paper also mentioning tar in the region. Tar blocks in particular floating to the surface of the Dead Sea, which of course is very dense. It's a sea because of its high salinity level. You've also got veins and seepages of tar coming to the surface on land in a liquid form. Here's a photo from an old archaeological journal, somewhere around the early 20th century, of a man standing on a block of tar. It's not just modern sources that mention this, though. The ancients were also aware of it and were using tar. For example, the Jewish historian Josephus reported this about 2,000 years ago, and you also got the Roman historian Tacitus talking about this tar floating to the top of the Dead Sea and being collected by the natives. So we know it had some kind of economic use for them, some sort of application. It was of value for them back then even. So where is Sodom? Well, another name for Sodom is Bab Edh-Dhra. It has a marker. We don't know exactly where the boundary walls are. They've only excavated certain sections. Sample trenches have been dug by archaeologists in the 20s, 60s, and the 1970s. I encourage you to look at a video on this by Dr. Joel Kramer. He goes into a lot of detail, and quite frankly, that video just blew my mind. It's really interesting to see how much evidence there actually is for the existence of Sodom at the site. Not just Sodom, but all 5 cities of the plain mentioned in the Bible. You can see it's pretty close to the southern end of the Dead Sea. So this is sort of southeastern end of the Dead Sea, about 8 kilometers away on the Jordanian side. There's an objection, though, raised by a skeptic called Nissenbaum, and he says that the asphalt that is found today is usually quite hard. And then he goes on to say it's difficult to reconcile those occurrences with that of asphalt pits into which a person or animal can sink. So it's pretty easy to debunk, though, because yes, tar may be in liquid form at some point, but it does eventually harden. I mean, we've all been to construction sites on roads where we see them tarring the road, and we're told not to drive on certain sections because the tar hasn't hardened yet. Although that's not pure tar, it's normally mixed in with some kind of aggregate. So over 2,000 years, of course, it's going to harden for sure. It can harden because of loss of volatiles, oxidation. So this is a well-known process. There's no mystery to it. So I think that objection has just got no merit at all. Okay, there's another thing I haven't touched on. That's human interference. Humans, both in modern and ancient times, had uses for tar. In ancient times, they used it as an adhesive for artwork, embalming, fumigation, as a mortar, sealant, and medical uses even. So obviously, if it had use to them, they would have been extracting it. So the tar pits of Sodom and Gomorrah that the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah or their company fell into, I doubt we're going to find it in its original undisturbed form. That was about 4,000 years ago, around 2000 BC, the time of Abraham and Lot. So it's unlikely it's going to be standing there. It would have either hardened or been extracted, or possibly even covered by the moving sands, because as the Bible mentions, no plants are going to grow there. And yeah, if you look at pictures of Sodom and Gomorrah, it looks like the moon. There are no plants growing at all. Where might the tar pits have been, though? What are plausible or likely locations? Well, wadis. So over here we've got Bab Edh-Dhra, which of course Bab Edh-Dhra is the name for Sodom. You've got a wadi here and a wadi here, and there may be other wadis in the region. And typically that's where you're going to find seepages of tar coming to the surface. And a wadi is basically a depression in the ground, like a dried up riverbed. And of course, in the rainy season, when it's covered in water, it's going to be especially dangerous. For example, the tarpits in California at La Brea, and they have water over them, which makes them extremely dangerous, and that's why they've got a fence around it to stop visitors from going in there. So it's easy to see how the kings, or the company with the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, could have easily fallen into these tarpits when they were fleeing a battle. I hope you've enjoyed this video. See you next time.